Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Camilla Landrum.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Camilla Landrum. I serve as the Executive Director of the Detroit branch at NAACP. It is my pleasure to bring our President, Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, to the podium for the purpose of a press conference.
Thank you, Mr. Landrum. Let me say good morning to everybody. And we appreciate your being here on such short notice, but it is a very important notice that we send out to the community these very critical times. I have a statement that I'd like to make, and then we'll entertain any questions that you may have. Halloween is over, but Kristina Karamo is still playing dirty tricks. The latest antics of this Republican candidate for Secretary of State, Kristina Karamo, is another indication of the treachery, deceit, and the very toxic poison that has infected the basic right to vote of every American. The so-called lawsuit in which Karamo wants to sue the city of Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey and the Detroit Board of Election Inspectors is another example of a desperate individual and a desperate party. It is a desperate move because it creates a political desperation within our community. Ms. Karamo, a conspiracy theorist in league with the twice impeached ex-president Donald Trump, also participated in efforts to challenge the Detroit results from the 2020 election. She is still up to her dirty tricks. This lawsuit is geared only towards the city of Detroit, a majority African-American city. It is designed to stop the effort to mobilize and drive voter participation. It is targeted in its content and racist by its intent. It is intended to disenfranchise Black voters, Black people. There is no evidence of voter fraud. There is no pattern or practice of mail-in ballot abuse. It is simply a lawsuit in search of a violation. It is put up and proposed up by fraud. It signals the need to gain publicity and the intentionality of intimidating and suppressing Detroit voters who are likely to use a legal process to exercise their constitutional rights. This is part of a national strategy of intimidation. In Arizona, we see armed vigilantes wearing fatigues and masks, supposedly patrolling drop boxes to prevent voter fraud. They are simply trying to intimidate and suppress voters from exercising their right to use their franchise. In Florida, it is the so-called election protection police. They are arresting minority voters who have been given the right to vote as Florida passed a law granting ex-offenders this constitutional franchise. It's not voter protection, it's really voter suppression. Ms. Karamo has recently withdrawn a motion to disqualify 58 Wayne County circuit judges from overseeing this particular matter if it is brought before them. It is another example, an indication of a frivolous and dangerous waste of time in a matter that has not shown any evidence of an issue here in the city of Detroit. This is a setup to discredit an election before it is even held. We in the NAACP will not go for the okey doke, this BS, bad stuff, as opposed to shutting down and eliminating absentee ballots. Ms. Karamo, as a candidate for Secretary of State, ought to be advocating ways in which he can increase and advance the voting turnout here in the city of Detroit and throughout the state of Michigan. Her lawsuit, which references 2,000 mules, a debunked conspiracy theory, emanate from the extreme right-wing political commentator Dinesh D'Souza. It amplifies the claiming of unnamed nonprofit organizations paid mules connected with the Democratic Party to legally collect and deposit ballots into drop boxes. These drop boxes are located in the swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, particularly highlighted during the 2020 presidential election. There is no evidence, nowhere by nobody, that this has been the case. We reject this lawsuit. We pray that the Detroit City Clerk, Janice Winfrey, and her team will stand up along with the citizens of Detroit to beat back this conspiracy to keep Detroiters from exercising their constitutional right. In case Ms. Karamo and her cohorts are not aware, there is a law in Michigan voted successfully in 2018 by Michiganders called No Reason Absentee Voting. It provides all voters, including those in Detroit, with the right to absentee voting, regardless of reason, in person or by mail. If this is the kind of nonsensical ploy that Ms. Karamo will engage in before winning an elective office, one can only wonder about any further drama, delusion, and nightmares she would create. This is obviously a clear indication of what Michigan can look forward to if for some ungodly reason she manages to scare her way into elective office. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. warned us years ago. He warned us. Every minority and every people has its share of opportunists, profiteers, freeloaders, and escapists. The hammer blows of discrimination, poverty, and segregation must warp and corrupt some. No one can pretend that because the people may be oppressed, that every individual member is virtuous and worthy. He told us that years ago. Yesterday was Halloween. I went trick-or-treating with my daughter. The only thing missing in the politics of horror at this moment is a costume reflective of this haunting episode in Michigan politics. Well, all the tricks are over now. Detroiters, it is now time for the treats. Take your souls to the polls and treat yourself to representatives who will tell the truth, stand up for the rights of all Michiganders, and guarantee your access to the voting booth. Thank you very much. We hope and we pray that Ms. Karamo and others will receive that message. We will have election protection from early morning on election day through the close of the polls. We have lawyers on site. We'll have challengers and voters and people who will be out there to make sure that nobody is intimidated or prevented from voting. I'd like for one of our attorneys who works with our legal redress component and also our election protection area, Attorney Richard Mack, if he would come and say a word about election protection and the frivolity of this current lawsuit. Attorney Mack.
Thank you, Reverend Anthony. We certainly appreciate your leadership here at the branch. You know, one thing that's so interesting about how obvious the attempt is of Ms. Karamo is that the challenge is based on the fact that the absentee voter county boards are doing the counting. Well, Detroit isn't the only city in Michigan which does that. But somehow, the other less Black communities didn't find their way as defendants on her lawsuit. Somehow, the other less Black communities didn't find their way into the target of Ms. Karamo and her cohorts. Make no mistake, unfortunately, this African-American woman is trying to suppress African-American votes. We in Detroit are going to take it, we in the branch are going to take it, and we in Michigan, of all races, should not take suppression of any race, of any group of people. All of us ought to be enraged, because if it's us today, it's you tomorrow. Here at the branch, we are going to be doing election protection efforts. We'll be here before 7. We'll be here after the polls close. We'll be making sure that if there are any issues at all with you voting, whether it be a misplaced, whether it be a poll site that's giving the wrong information, or whether the it's not working, or whatever the case is, or suppression. We do see across the country efforts to suppress the vote. We do see that that's active. That's what this Trump initiative has really been about, is to make sure that Black and brown people are afraid to vote. We're here standing against that. So please reach out to us if there's any issue that you have, and encourage everyone to participate in this franchise.
Thank you, Attorney Mack. And for the record, persons can call and contact the branch at the hotline number is 664-2424, 664-2424. We're standing by that to assist you to exercise your franchise. Let me pause now and ask if anyone has any questions from the media. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, hi, Claire Anderson with the Detroit Free Press. Wondering if you all would support sanctions against the lawyers who are involved in this lawsuit, just so that Detroit voters don't have to, or Detroit residents don't have to foot the legal bill for defending.
I like you. I would certainly support sanctions at the highest level, because it is a waste of taxpayers' money. And we think that they should be sanctioned. And them as lawyers, and the veracity of how they represent themselves should be looked upon. I thought lawyers took some kind of oath when they become lawyers to do justice and to be always on the upside, and to utilize integrity and to come straight and not to play these games. So yes, we will most definitely support sanctions, and we encourage sanctions to be made against. Yes, sir.
Jason Coulthard, Channel 4. She references in the lawsuit problems with the August 2nd primary, but here we are far down the line where this is filed. What are your thoughts on the timing of the lawsuit?
Well, that's an interesting dynamic. As you raise it, we are less than 1 week away. Now, if this was the case, why didn't you raise that weeks ago? But now you wait until we're almost through the gate to determine and to file this frivolous lawsuit. It's a sign of desperation. It's a sign that I'm losing. I got to draw attention to myself. It's a sign that let me see where I can go in order to get the biggest bang for this buck, and that's Detroit. Detroit seems to be the scapegoat, the whipping place for individuals to come and to seize upon this moment. It was a place, you may recall, the 2020 election. Donald Trump mentioned Detroit and the kind of abuse that was here when there was none. It's a place where we have always found people came down to Huntington Place, TCF Center at that time, to intimidate those who were doing the counting and those who were in charge of the election for the citizens of Detroit, banging on windows and knocking on glasses and standing around them. This is a part of a strategy. And so if you cannot win straight, if you cannot play the game right, if you don't have the policy, if you don't have the program, then the best thing for you to do is try to disrupt and to corrupt the process. You know, I've heard Ms. Karamo indicate that the reason that she was running was because she wanted to stop or prevent abortions. Okay, what does that have to do with being Secretary of State? I've not heard nothing about what will you do if you become Secretary of State. Will you advance the vote? Will you increase access to the polls? Will you make it more accessible? Will you create something new? Will you bring something innovative to make the process easier? Will you train more people? Will you put more money into the process? What will you do as Secretary of State? All we've heard from her is let's stop Detroiters from voting. And that's a trick, and it's not a treat. Go right ahead.
You know, in litigation, I've been practicing law for a couple of decades now, and you often see lawsuits that are filed where the plaintiff knows that they're not going to win, but there's another ulterior motive for it. The point of the lawsuit, she knows that she's not going to win, but the point of the lawsuit is for those absentee voters in Detroit who may pick up the paper, oh, there's something wrong with the absentee vote, maybe I just shouldn't even send it in. If they could just shave off a few percentage points of absentee voters who think that because of the paper, because they read the headline, that they may have a problem with absentee voting, then that's a victory for her, knowing that even though at the end of the day, she's going to lose. So that's why we encourage Detroiters specifically, but all voters, to ignore this garbage and continue to put your absentee voters in the mail and do so today.
Would you,
Or actually bring it in by now.
would you expect a decision on the lawsuit, by the way, before election day?
Yes.
Oh, you think?
It makes sense for it to be made before election day, so yes. I can't see any reason why they would hold after election day. It's moot. Any other questions, Simon?
Reverend, could you please reiterate what you feel is at stake in this next election?
What's at stake is our very future. What's at stake is which way this state will go and the country will go, locally and nationally. I mean, education is on the line. Access to the very voting booth is on the line. These are people, among them Karamo, who have denied the results of the presidential election of 2020. They don't believe that the current president is the president. That's what we face. We face an increase in intimidation. We face an increase of divisive tactics used by these individuals. The economic development in our communities is on the line. Infrastructure is on the line. My Social Security and your Social Security and your mamas and your daddies and your grandmamas and your aunties' Social Security is on the line. Now, you may not need it, but your people need it. And ask them if they want it cut. That's on the line. Student tuition is on the line. You may not be needed. Simon, you got all your degrees. You don't need college no more. But there may be somebody in your family that's in college. You still may have some loans that you ain't paid off yet. And so you want that reduced. So all that's on the line. And I'm not trying to be humorous. This is serious because we all know it. It's on the line. And women's rights are on the line. The ability of women to determine what they will do with their own bodies. I dare say, if men were forced to get vasectomies, and we were going to vote on that, that was going to be put in the form of a bill. It would never be a bill. It'd never make it to the ballot. If the shoe was on the line, I'm a man. If the shoe was on the other foot, we would not even having this discussion. And so we have to stand up with the women. They want to take us back 200 or 300 years in terms of this whole situation. Regardless of what your situation is, I'm concerned about women that may have miscarriages, women that may have an issue with regards to their own personal safety, life or death. So it's bigger than just, one issue in terms of will I not have a child? There are a whole lot of dynamics that's involved in this. And so all of that's on the line, Simon. You know that. Police and relationship between the community and our people. All that stuff is on the line. So everything is on the line. Our very democracy is on the line. We've come too far to turn back now. So when I go to the poll, and I hope when you go to the poll, you see all of that. Because your vote is most important. And your vote does matter. It counts. They're counting on us not to show up at the polls. If we don't, they get the victory. And we cannot allow it down. Everybody got to get in this game. Because 2022 is next week. 2024 is right around the corner. Take your souls to the polls and vote like your life depends upon it. Because quite frankly, it does. Any other questions?
We've all seen the billboards of Kristina Karamo around the city of Detroit. Wondering if you could sort of speak to that strategy and if you expect her to have successfully courted any voters in the city and win, maybe not win Detroit, but win some Detroit voters over.
Of course, even Trump won a few. So everybody has access to and has the right to put up posters, billboards, commercials, literature, TV, ads. That's your right. I'm sure there are people who will succumb to the line that she is giving. There always are. You heard what I said regarding Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., what he said years ago. And quite frankly, that's the case today. There are people who go for that. But we pray that there are more people who do not, regardless of how many billboards she puts up. Look at the record. I always tell people, don't focus in on so much what people say they're going to do. Look at what they have done. Look at what they are doing. And when you look at what she has done, I don't see a record. I don't see any indication of anything that makes me and should make Detroiters believe that this is a person that's going to work in your interest. She's a denier of our constitutional rights. She's a denier of what has already been proven in over 60 courts across this country, that this was a fair election, that there was no voter fraud. She is already denying that even a Republican-appointed commission in the state of Michigan, which said there was no evidence of fraud, that this was a safe election, that it was one of the best elections we've had. Even after all of that, she's still denying that. And is that the kind of individual that you want to represent you? If that's what you want, you're welcome to it. It's not what I believe we should have representing our city and our community. That's why I'm taking my soul to the poll. Any other questions?
Should parents or the state have the ultimate voice in medical procedures involving their juvenile children?
I think parents have a right. I want to right with my child. When you say children, that means that they're not yet prepared to make adult-like decisions. So yeah, and that's a question. You know, some people want the legislator to make those, legislative body to make those decisions. I don't think so, because they got hidden agendas. But I would rather say that parents should have the right to weigh in on their child's life. They do so in all other cases down there. Think of the 14-year-old who had to be transported from state to state, 14 years of age, because they passed laws indicating that she could not have that health care procedure. And that's a decision that should be between the doctor and the parent and the individual. So yeah, I believe that.
Has that side of the discussion made the proposal 3 more complex or
Okay,
less
we're not here to
complex
talk
for
about
parents?
proposal 3. We're here to talk about Karamo.
And Brad,
So we
that's-
can deal with that on another.
Brad, that was my question. Where in proposal 3 is that the issue?
Is
That
that
issue's not in proposal 3. I'm
Right.
looking at the language.
right?
There's nothing in here that speaks to parents having influence or control over.
Are you reading the 100-word summary?
I'm reading what's on the ballot, sir.
Let's do this. We are here to deal with Ms. Karamo. Now, on the other day in another situation, we can talk about that, but I don't want to lose focus on this. So I don't want you to go out here talking about proposal, because hell no, we ain't talking about that. We talking about the lawsuit. And you got statements to the effect. So he has a side question about something that ain't got to do with what we talking.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate you.